have no idea what's going to really be in there. It's either going to be empty, which is a possibility, or we could find either a skeleton or a mummy.
In 2017, a croc team of forensic scientists crocked open a concrete sealed grave in suburban Philadelphia. Inside was supposed to be the body of H. Holmes, America's first serial killer, a man executed by hanging in 1896. For 121 years, nobody had ever proven whether the body in that grave was actually his. New reports that morning sent shockwaves across the country. The remains of a suspected 19th century serial killer born in New Hampshire were being exhumed in Pennsylvania. Because for 121 years, one dark, chilling theory had refused to die: that Holmes, the greatest con artist of the entire 19th century, had pulled off one final, perfect con. That he bribed prison guards, swapped his body with a corpse, and simply walked out of Moyamensing prison alive while another man swung from the rope in his place. That the thick concrete slab wasn't meant to protect his corpse, it was meant to hide the fact that it wasn't him at all. Scientists carefully extracted DNA from the remains, rushed the samples to one of the most advanced forensic genetics labs on the planet, and ran it against living descendants. When the results finally came back, the lead archaeologist on the case, Samantha Cox from the University of Pennsylvania, said one single sentence that slammed the door on over a century of conspiracy theories. But here's the deal. What she confirmed wasn't what anyone expected. The DNA didn't unmask a secret identity. It didn't reveal some hidden monster. It revealed something far more disturbing about the lies we've been happily telling ourselves for over 100 years. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why the truth is way more unsettling than any conspiracy theory ever was. The devil they built. His real name was Herman Webster Mudgett, and the first thing you need to understand about him is that he wasn't the criminal mastermind history turned him into. He was worse. He was simpler, and that's exactly what makes him absolutely terrifying. Born in 1861 in New Hampshire, Mudgett graduated from the University of Michigan Medical School in 1884. While he was there, he got his hands dirty procuring cadavers for the school, stealing bodies so medical students could practice carving them open. Keep that detail locked in your mind. It matters later. He married 3 different women without ever divorcing any of them. He lied the way other people breathe, constantly, effortlessly, and about absolutely everything. By 1886, he had drifted into Chicago under the name H. Holmes and took over a pharmacy in the Englewood neighborhood. Right across the street, he started building a massive 3-story structure. The ground floor was shops, the upper floors were supposed to be apartments, and, eventually, hotel rooms for the millions of visitors coming to the 1893 World's Columbian Exposition, the greatest fair the world had ever seen. Newspapers would later christen it the Murder Castle. And here's the catch that almost nobody talks about. Most of what you've heard about that building is wildly exaggerated or completely made up. Historian Adam Seltzer spent years buried in original police reports, court documents, and yellowed newspaper archives. What he discovered left him stunned at the mountain of mythology that had grown around one crooked building. It was never a functioning hotel with a front desk and nightly rates where strangers checked in and simply vanished. It was short-term rental apartments where tenants lived for months, sometimes years. The 3rd floor was never finished, never furnished, and never opened to the public as any kind of hotel. As Seltzer put it, the entire project was nothing more than an elaborate machine to swindle suppliers, investors, and insurance companies. Yes, there were hidden rooms, but they were mostly used to hide furniture Holmes had bought on credit and never planned to pay for. The wild tales of industrial gas chambers, soundproof torture rooms, and acid vats running on factory scale, those were invented by rival newspapers locked in a vicious circulation war, desperate to out-sensationalize each other, not based on any real evidence or police findings. But here's what is real. Holmes killed people who knew him, people who trusted him. He murdered his own business partner, Benjamin Peitzel, by knocking him out with chloroform and setting him on fire, all for a $10,000 insurance payout. Then he took his 3 young children from their mother, looked her dead in the eyes, and told her he was protecting them. Philadelphia detective Frank Geyer spent months retracing Holmes' bloody footsteps. He found the bodies of 2 of those children, Nellie and Alice, locked inside a trunk in a Toronto cellar, asphyxiated with gas. Their brothers Howard's charred remains turned up stuffed inside a chimney in an Indiana cottage. Those are real victims, real children, and the man who killed them looked their mother straight in the eye and smiled. If you think that story's disturbing enough, wait until you hear what happened at the gallows. Subscribe right now because what comes next is the part almost nobody ever talks about. 15 minutes on the rope. May 7th, 1896, Moyamensing Prison, Philadelphia, 10 a.m. in the morning. Holmes slept like a baby the night before. Guards had to wake him twice. He ate a full breakfast, received last rites from 2 Catholic priests, shook hands with his lawyers, calm, almost cheerful. He walked onto the scaffold, rested his hands on the railing, and made one final statement to the witnesses, denying he had ever murdered anyone. Then he knelt, prayed, stood up, and simply said goodbye. At 10:12, the trapdoor dropped. His neck didn't snap. The fall tore the muscles in his neck, leaving him almost completely paralyzed, but not dead, not yet. Holmes was still conscious when the rope took his full weight, and what happened next was something every single witness in that prison yard would carry to their graves. His body twitched, it convulsed, it jerked violently on the end of that rope for 15 full minutes straight, some accounts say 20. Dozens of jurors, physicians, lawyers, and 2 Catholic priests stood in dead silence and watched the most notorious criminal in America slowly strangle to death, inch by inch, breath by gasping breath. The coroner's physician, Dr. Stodd, later complained bitterly that no autopsy was ever performed. Holmes had specifically requested his body remain untouched, and the authorities actually honored it. Nobody spoke during those 15 agonizing minutes. Nobody moved. The only sounds were the creak of the rope and the involuntary spasms of a body that refused to die. He was finally pronounced dead 30 minutes after the drop. His body was cut down, and within hours the very first lie was already taking root. Now this is where it gets deeply uncomfortable, because what happened next didn't just create a mystery, it created a mythology that would prove almost impossible to kill. Before the execution, Holmes had made one very strange request. He wanted his coffin encased in concrete, the grave dug 10 feet deep, and the whole thing sealed shut forever. His stated reason: he was terrified of body snatchers. After all, he had stolen corpses himself in medical school. He knew exactly what happened to unprotected bodies. But to the public, that request screamed something far more sinister. Why would a dead man care so much about protecting his corpse unless he planned to still be alive when they poured the concrete? Then, 2 years later, the Chicago Daily Inter-Ocean dropped a bombshell. Within 2 hours of the hanging, they claimed, an undertaker's wagon rolled out of the prison gates. The casket inside was supposed to contain Holmes's body, but the paper swore it actually carried a very much alive Holmes. The conspiracy exploded. He bribed the guards. He switched places with another prisoner. He escaped to South America. He sailed to England and became Jack the Ripper. Holmes's own great-great-grandson, Jeff Mudgett, would later publicly argue that the timelines overlapped and the handwriting matched. Conspiracy forums, documentaries, and true crime books kept the fire burning for generations. The 3rd floor was never finished, never furnished, and never opened to the public as any kind of hotel. And that concrete grave became the holy grail of every theory. Skeptics said it proved he was hiding something. Believers said it proved he was dead. Neither side had proof. Both sides had absolute conviction. For 121 years, the argument raged in circles because no one had ever cracked that concrete open. Until 2017, the empty coffin. Jeff Mudgett had spent years fighting for this moment. He and other descendants petitioned a Delaware County court for permission to exhume the grave at Holy Cross Cemetery in Yeadon, Pennsylvania. The History Channel's American Ripper series funded the dig, and the University of Pennsylvania sent their absolute best. Archaeologist Samantha Cox and physical anthropologist Janet Monge. The dig began in May 2017, and from the very first shovel, nothing went according to plan. They knew from records the coffin was supposed to be encased in concrete, buried 10 feet deep in an oversized plot. What they didn't know was what 121 years underground had done to it. 8 feet down, they hit a perfectly preserved wooden box. The crew held their breath as they pried it open. Empty. Just a few scraps of wood. No body, no remains, no concrete. Just an empty coffin sitting in the grave of America's most infamous serial killer. The silence at the dig site was deafening. Samantha Cox later called the moment agonizing. Her team stood 10 feet deep in mud, staring at the exact nightmare scenario conspiracy theorists had predicted for a century. It was the last day they had budgeted for digging. Light was fading fast, the production budget was gone, and that empty coffin was screaming one thing loud and clear. Holmes got away with it. As Cox later joked, archaeologists always say their best finds come on the final day, but this didn't feel like a joke. This felt like the ultimate con artist had just won again from beyond the grave. And get this, Cox refused to quit. She made the call to keep digging, to probe beneath the floor of that decoy coffin. With only hours of daylight left, the team drilled down 1 foot, then 2. And that's when they struck something solid. A second coffin, completely encased in concrete, exactly as the 1896 newspaper reports had described. The real one had been hiding underneath the fake the entire time. Breaking through 121-year-old cement was brutal, back-breaking work. Hours of hammering, chiseling, and drilling through material that had turned harder than stone. Then the rain started. A section of the trench wall collapsed, dumping thick mud straight onto the skull, the single most important piece of evidence in the entire grave. Cox literally stuck her face into the hole to see what was underneath. And when they finally broke through, what they found was something none of them had ever seen before. The anaerobic environment, sealed concrete submerged below the water table, had created a bizarre preservation paradox. Holmes' clothing was still perfectly recognizable: boots, waistcoat, suit coat. No pants. The archaeologists believe he soiled himself during the hanging. His famous bushy mustache was still attached to the skull until the instant fresh air hit it and crumbled to dust. On his chest lay a small metal cross engraved with 5 simple words: H. H. Holmes died May 7th, 1896. But the body itself? Cox didn't sugarcoat it. It stank. Once it gets to that point, we can't do anything with it. It's basically sludge. The soft tissue had completely liquefied, useless. But the bones had survived, and so had his teeth. And that was enough. The science that ended a century of lies. Identification happened in 3 crushing waves, and each one made the previous look like child's play. First, the skeleton. Cox and Monge examined the bones and confirmed they belonged to a male in his mid-30s of European descent, a perfect match for Holmes, who was 34 when he died. Second, the teeth. This was the breakthrough nobody saw coming. The Penn team found high-quality gold-foil dental fillings, the kind only a wealthy man could afford in the 1890s. They compared the skull's dental work against a detailed 1896 prison medical report from the Journal of American Medical Association, complete with photographs of dental casts. Martin Leese, chair of the Department of Oral Medicine at Penn School of Dental Medicine, helped with the analysis. The skull still had 1 molar. The prison records described that exact same tooth in the exact same condition. The match was flawless. Third, the DNA. Cox's team extracted genetic material from the pulp inside a single tooth, the only viable biological material left after 121 years in a waterlogged concrete tomb. They sent it across the Atlantic to King's College London, one of the world's top ancient DNA labs. Professor Denise Sindercombe-Court, head of the DNA analysis, confirmed her lab followed strict ISO 17025 accreditation. Samples were given anonymous numbers only. No scientist knew whose remains they were testing. Results were double-checked by completely separate analysts. Zero room for bias, zero room for wishful thinking. And when the results came back, they delivered a conclusive genetic match between the remains and Jeff Mudgett, Holmes's living great-great-grandson. Samantha Cox's final statement left zero doubt. From a scientific standpoint, there is no doubt. The body was Herman Webster Mudgett, H.H. Holmes. He didn't fake his death, he didn't bribe anyone, he didn't escape to South America, he didn't become Jack the Ripper. He was hanged, he died, he was buried, and he stayed buried for 121 years. But here's the deal. That should have been the end of the story. It wasn't. Because what the DNA didn't prove is the part that should actually terrify you. The lie that outlived the liar. The DNA confirmed who was in the grave. That's it. That is the only scientific conclusion. Everything else you've heard? Pure mythology. The DNA didn't prove how many people Holmes killed. It identified 0 unknown victims. It didn't validate the body counts of 100, 200, or more that flood every thumbnail on this platform. It revealed no secret accomplices, no hidden identity, no Jack the Ripper connection. And here's the catch that hurts. Even Holmes's famous confession was just another con. He sold it to the Hearst newspaper empire for $10,000 cash. It was entertainment product, not truth. He confessed to 27 murders. Several of those so-called victims were still very much alive. One man, L.W. Warner, was sitting in his living room in Newton, Iowa when he read that Holmes had claimed to kill him. He was baffled. He was literally breathing. Another woman, Kate Durkee, turned up alive and well. Holmes hadn't even bothered to check if she was dead before adding her name to the list. And on the morning of his own execution, Holmes walked back almost everything. He told the crowd he had only killed 2 people. The mythical body count of 200? Adam Seltzer traced it to one throwaway line in a 1940 Mustange pulp book by Herbert Asbury called Gem of the Prairie. Asbury was famous for inventing details and calling it history. He just picked a bigger number than anyone before him, and nobody ever questioned it. The story of 50 missing World's Fair visitors lured to the murder castle, also invented by Asbury. No police reports, no missing persons files, no evidence whatsoever. The real historical consensus, after researchers actually dug through the primary records, 9 confirmed victims, possibly a few more, nowhere near the hundreds that dominate the internet today. And that's when the real picture finally snaps into terrifying focus. Holmes wasn't some unstoppable evil genius who outsmarted the world. He was a sloppy, small-time con artist who got caught over and over again. Merchants figured out his scams within days. He was sued constantly. He survived on pure audacity, charm, and the habit of skipping town before the lawsuits caught up. Seltzer's research paints a brutally honest portrait. A man who probably dreamed of faking his death, but was nowhere near competent enough to actually pull it off. The witnesses at his execution knew him personally. They hated him, and they had every reason to make damn sure the right man was hanging from that rope. But the myth of the genius monster sells way better than the reality of a petty swindler who murdered people he knew for insurance money. So, the myth won. It always wins. Newspapers built it in the 1890s. Pulp writers like Asbury inflated it in the 1940s. Television producers polished it for modern screens. And the internet, the greatest myth amplification machine ever invented, made it immortal. Every single Halloween, the body count jumps another 100 in someone's new retelling. And Holmes, the liar, the manipulator, the man who literally sold his own fake confession for cash, would have loved every single second of it. Holmes didn't need to escape that grave. His lies already had. The question that remains is this. Holmes was caught, tried, convicted, executed, buried in concrete, and confirmed by DNA. And for over a century, millions of people chose to believe his lies over the sworn testimony of dozens of eyewitnesses who watched him die. They chose one single 1898 newspaper article over the entire public record. They chose the thrilling story over the documented truth. The real victims, Benjamin Peitzel and his children Howard, Nellie, and Alice, Julia Connor and her daughter Pearl, Emmeline Segrand, Minnie, and Nanny Williams, those names get buried under the mythology every single day. Real people, real suffering, completely drowned out by an inflated legend that a dead con artist would have been thrilled to watch still growing. The 2017 exhumation didn't unmask a hidden villain, it unmasked us. Our endless appetite for the spectacular over the true, our willingness to let a good liar keep winning decade after decade as long as the story stays entertaining. So here's what I want you to sit with tonight. If a documented liar from the 1890s can still control the story in 2026, whose lies are you believing right now without even realizing it? Drop your answer in the comments. If this is the kind of content that makes you question the stories you've been told your whole life, hit subscribe and smash that like button, because the next one goes even deeper.